Hey everybody, it's Rod Giltaka from the CCFR. You may have heard about the CCFR's conflict with this group, Doctors for Protection from Guns or something. Look around social media, you'll find it. So this whole thing with the doctors group is blowing up, and here's why it's interesting, and here's why you should be interested, especially if you're one of these doctors. It all started with Najma Ahmed, who's a doctor in Toronto, I think, tweeting that no civilian needs access to guns. The harms outweigh any benefit. The evidence is clear. So not only is that statement demonstrably false, but of course, who is she to tell people what they need? Who are any of us to do that? So yeah, it rubbed people the wrong way. And of course, she's using her status as a doctor to support some legislative change. So that's where it becomes political. And that's where she's entering other people's lives. So as a person that's spent thousands of hours researching and investigating this topic, I took exception to the doctors becoming political and using their qualifications, medical qualifications, concerning an issue that I know to be incredibly complex, to say the least. Now, I'm going to share an example of that complexity in a minute, and I assure you, you're going to want to hear this, especially if you're one of these doctors. We're going to do something really important for you. Now, when our community drew attention to what these doctors were doing, the reaction was to immediately post insults, calling us bullies, that were funded by the big gun industry, wherever that is, that were the NRA, all this stuff, demonstrably untrue. It's false, entirely false. And thus, it actually confirms their previous bad behavior. And that was surprising to me, to be honest. Now remember, who's trying to intervene in whose lives here? Well, it's certainly not us. We didn't start any of this. So I offered to debate a few of these people. And the response from them was only to double down, to intensify. And it's still going on right now. So let me summarize this for you, kind of what the whole situation is. They made statements indicating to me that they had no idea what they're talking about. How do I know? I do this stuff for a living. And they made these statements as doctors, not as individuals. So we call them out on it, and I'll paraphrase their reaction as it comes across to me. It's this: how dare you disagree with me on matters of firearm legislation and policy and regulation and enforcement? I am a medical doctor. I have a PhD, you peasant. That's how it struck me. So every time that they've had an opportunity to re-engage in a calm civil discussion with us, they double down again. One of these doctors actually just tweeted that we're disagreeing with them because we're racists and misogynists. This is a doctor. How completely disconnected from reality do you need to be to respond like that in public, on a public platform? And I mean this genuinely. I find the whole thing actually quite shocking. I'm genuinely shocked. So despite all this, I want to offer these people some informed counsel, okay? So for the sake of these doctors, let me give you one example of what's at stake in this obscenely complex topic that they've jumped into head first. Okay, now if you're one of these doctors, this is really important for you. And you know what? You don't have to tell anybody at work that you've watched this video, okay? But if you care about this topic, you need to hear this. We're going to unpack something here. We're going to follow a thought all the way through. Now, one of the things that this group is advocating for is a ban on handguns. Okay? Now, let's think about this for a second all the way through, and I'm going to give you something you're not going to hear from the anti-gun crowd. Okay, 2.1 million licensed, or Canadians are licensed to buy firearms and to acquire and possess firearms in Canada. 2.1 million, that's a lot of people. Over 500,000 of them have an additional license or an additional privilege, which is called an RPAL, meaning a restricted possession and acquisition license, which is what they need to legally acquire and possess a handgun. So over 500,000 Canadians can actually be in lawful possession of handguns. And we know that there's somewhere around 900,000 handguns in Canada. So almost all of them, I bet you, has a handgun. For the ones that don't, the ones that do probably have a few of them. So we're talking about a lot of people here. If you wanted to, let's say the doctors got what they wanted, okay, and they were ushered up to this ivory tower and they looked down at all the commoners and they said, none of you people can be trusted, only us, only the government should have guns, and now we're banning all these guns, so you have to turn them all in. Legally, how that would be accomplished is they would move handguns from the restricted classification. I'm not going to get into classifications right now because I'm trying to do this as quickly as I can, into another classification, prohibited. Prohibited is the classification that the government has for guns that they say just basically they're just too dangerous to own. You cannot even trust people. They're so dangerous you can't No one can be trusted to even own these things. So they would move handguns into the prohibited category. Now, I would imagine that the majority of those 500,000 people, or whatever, 480,000 that actually possess a handgun, the majority of them would probably just turn them in. They'd say, well, I know who I'm voting for the rest of my life. I'm never voting for these people again. And anybody that had a part in this, I'll hate them forever. I can imagine how sour they'd be. If it was me, I'd be extremely angry and it would not wear off. It would be for a long time. And why? Because I haven't done anything to deserve any of this stuff. But think about this. I would bet there'd be 5%, maybe at least, but I'm not sure because we've never really faced anything like that before. Maybe there's 5% of the people that say, you know what, I'm not giving them to you. I haven't done anything. You know what I have done? For 30 years, you've increased the cost and the legal exposure that I've had to experience to hold on to my handguns, and I've followed every one of your ridiculous laws, and some of them are really ridiculous. We can get into that another time. Like, just ridiculous. I followed them to the letter. And now, after I've done all of that stuff, you're going to say, nope, you still can't be trusted. Forget about everything you've done. We're taking them anyway. Some people are going to just say, well, I'm not giving them up. Come and get them. Now, there might be people that say, well, I'm not giving them up because maybe there's an election coming up and I'm going to wait it out and see, maybe it'll get reversed by the time they, really bang on my door or whatever people's reasons are, right? And I don't even think that their reasons are unreasonable. I don't advocate for breaking the law, but man, you can see how this would be unfair for a lot of people. So that means there'd be, 5% of 500,000 would be 25,000 people. So how does the government, how do they get those guns away from those people? They got to go get them. Well, what does that look like? Well, these are people that are now in what we would call unauthorized possession of a prohibited firearm, which gets you a mandatory minimum 3 years. Mandatory minimum 3 years in prison, up to 10 years depending on the circumstances of the offense. Okay, these are now hardened criminals. And these are, to go to the house to get that gun, that's a gun call. So it's not a general duty member going there and going, hey, come on, Rod, I know you got the pistol. Come on, give it up, you silly guy. No, it's not general duty members. Who goes to the house? It's ERT. And if you're not familiar with ERT, what is ERT? Basically, it's a sledgehammer. ERT is designed to smash things and break them, okay? These are people in full military gear with semi-auto rifles and handguns and flashbangs, meaning distraction devices that they throw in, destroy your hearing and blind you. And so the process of that, they may or may not knock on the door. They may breach the door. So now you've got Joe and Jane Canadian sitting there watching The Bachelor or whatever, and you've got their two kids, their two teenagers there, and all of a sudden, boom, the door comes off its hinges, a distraction device is rolled in there, boom, everybody's blind, and all these guys, 15 guys, come pouring into the house, and they point guns in the faces of everyone in there, including the kids. Okay, why do they have to do that? Because it's a gun call, man. They don't know what's happening. They don't want to get shot either. So they have no idea, okay? And I don't blame them for it. Okay, they're going to go in there, guns drawn, pointing the guns in all these people's faces, and maybe one of the kids has a cell phone. Maybe one of the kids has a remote control, and maybe they get shot right through the neck and killed by ERT. And that stuff happens sometimes. It's hard to even say whose fault that is, but it's an interaction that never needed to happen in the first place. So that's what it really looks like. And it's not one family. It's 25,000 people if 5% of them decide not to comply. Okay? So that's what you're talking about. And so it's really important that you know that, because this is exactly what you're advocating for. Exactly. So why not, if you're going to advocate for it, own it. That's what you're looking for. Okay, now, if you don't like that, what we have to do is we have to reverse all that. We got to reel that all back and go, okay, now I know a little bit more about this topic. Is my position on banning handguns from all the people that are licensed, because criminals don't have a license to possess a handgun, but yet they have them anyway, right? So a ban doesn't affect any criminals. And the only defense that the anti-gun people have is, oh, well, it's going to limit the supply. There are countless examples of countries that have massive gun control, that have bigger gun problems than Canada or even the United States. And we have examples of societies that have guns everywhere that don't have gun crime. No, the evidence is not clear. In fact, the evidence is in very serious dispute. And to say that it's not clear is being disingenuous. It's lying, right? So a conversation has to happen. So if you don't want to own all of that stuff that I just mentioned happening, then you're going to have to think that through, and you're hopefully realizing that this topic, there's a lot more at stake here. What kind of citizens are 100,000 of them going to be after they have their guns taken for no fault of their own? What do you think social cohesion? Do you think that's going to be a benefit to social cohesion, or is it going to be a detriment? Anyway, I'm not going to go on forever, but I'm hoping this is just one little peek in exactly what you're dealing with. This is a very serious issue, and it's not for people that sling insults or call each other sexist when they don't agree. It's not for that. It's for serious adults with experience to sit down and solve the problem of violence in our society. Because if that's truly the problem, then we need to solve the problem of violence. And you know what? Portraying gun owners as wanting a less safe Canada, being pro-violence and pro-murder and pro-sexism and pro-racism because they don't agree with bad ideas, that is, I'm not going to fall victim to my own hyperbole, but it's just, it's a really disgusting thought, okay? So I hope this has helped somebody out there understand what you're really dealing with. Gun control is not an argument about cigarettes. It's not an argument about seatbelts, okay? And that's why it's a lot more complex, and that's why we say stay in your lane. I know that's hard to hear, but if you want to get in our lane, then you're going to have to learn all this stuff first. Anyway, I will say this and finish off with this. The doctors, or at least NAJMA, is going to be at the Senate this Monday, and I will be there too. So I'm hoping that all of the anti-gun people, we can meet each other and exchange a smile and a kind word and maybe a handshake, and maybe we can even sit down and work on this stuff together. Work on reducing violence in our communities together, because gun owners want a safer Canada too. Anyway, I hope this helps. Take care, and we'll see you soon.